All right. The time is 6:32. Welcome, everybody. I would like to call this District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting with action to order. What?
There's no action.
No action.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
oh,
no
sorry. I was going to say what, as soon as I read that, I'm like, what are we taking action on?
No action tonight.
I heard that and thought.
Just straight up, Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Marilyn, please call the roll.
Member Flores.
Present.
Member Vita Daniels.
Present.
Member Dillon. Here. Member Giannotti for Adjournment late. Member Gretsch.
Here.
Member Strewing.
Here.
Member Thomas.
Here.
Awesome. All right, let's all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. No public participation. All right, we're going to skip right ahead. And this evening, we're going to begin with Human Resources and the 2025-26 Staffing Sectioning Overview at Pietros.
Thank you, President Gretsch. Tonight, I'm providing an update to the Board of Education on the staffing and course sectioning process for the 2025-2026 school year. Each March, we present our certified staffing recommendations based on student course selections, which began in January. At the end of February, the division chairs, associate principals, and central leadership team completed its review of the course sectioning numbers, and at this time, we are recommending a total instructional allocation of 266.9 FTE for the upcoming school year, which is an increase of 1.9 FTE over the current year. This increase is driven by two key factors: the continued expansion of both co-teaching offerings in special education and the growth of our multilingual department, which serves an expanding population of English learners every year. The current course selections reflect 3,816 students requesting courses for next year, compared to 3,781 students that we sectioned for at this time in 2024. As we've discussed in previous meetings and at this time last year, we are working with our multilingual department to finalize any additional bilingual certified staff that will be needed to serve as co-teachers to support our students in the ML classes. And as we finalize our master schedule, we will continue working with the associate principals and division chairs to determine if any adjustments to FTE are needed, and then present those to the Board of Education for approval. Additionally, the board has historically approved 0.4 FTE for discretionary allocation to accommodate shifts in enrollment. Last year, we used 0.3 FTE of this allotment over the summer, and if we find that additional staffing is necessary beyond the 0.4, we will bring a recommendation to the board for further consideration. This generally will happen over the summer when there isn't a board meeting in July, so we wouldn't have an opportunity to come to the board for a request for additional FTE prior to the start of the school year. Updated staffing information, along with accompanying board resolutions and action items, will be presented to the board for approval at the March 17th meeting. Does anybody have any questions about the staffing or sectioning update at this time?
I just have a question regarding like the staffing in terms of like the multilingual program and like the co-teaching. Like, are we expected to see like every year like an additional FTE come on board given like what's changing? Is it like the number of courses that they're teaching is expanding, so that's why we are needing to have an additional? So the question is like, so do we see that like trend as like the happening in the next couple of years?
It will continue to grow slightly as we move beyond freshman, sophomore, junior, and then into the senior year courses. And Dr. Owens, if you wanted to add.
Our multilingual, we have represented up through senior year already. The co-taught special education classes next year will be our final year of, implementation with our senior courses. So then after that, there would be no additional courses added. Excuse me.
So that growth will continue one more year and then level off.
Okay.
At least in special ed, but it's already leveled off in multilingual.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. the sections of multilingual courses could increase based on significant increase in enrollment of our multilingual students, but in terms of the graduation requirements and the other classes covered, those are covered. Excuse me.
It just triggered another question when we looked about, we had so much growth in the multilingual students. Have you seen that start to level off, or is it still? 'Cause I mean, I can't remember, I'm never gonna get the numbers right, so I'm not even gonna try. But it was like such a low number, and then it was astonishing how much of a jump we had. I mean,
We
like
are-
over 100 students, I remember one year.
We're over 200 and I believe 30 at this point.
Okay.
It's hard to predict because a lot of times we'll get a group of students, move-in students at the beginning of the year, so that's obviously post-sectioning, but we do anticipate, based on population studies that we've looked at over the next 10 years, we do expect increases, probably not as significant a jump as what we saw from when we were hovering around 80 for a while up to the 200 mark, but still increasing in
Okay.
number.
But more minimal, like incremental, smaller incremental.
That's what it looks like. Again, there's so many shifts happening that it's hard to totally predict, but that's what we are anticipating at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah, just, I pulled the numbers, so we were 134 in 21-22, 172 in 22-23, 197 last year, and then I'm not sure, so up over
Yeah.
200 this year. So, basically
Because I mean,
double.
if we're up like 30 students each year, if that's like the trend, is that like what? Because it was a big jump and then it's been a smaller trend, right? Of like.
Yeah, I mean, it'd probably be, let me see if I can go back further than that.
Because I'm just wondering.
Prior to that, there was a little more up and down, and the numbers were under 100, although I think they peaked above 100 at some point prior to that. Scott might remember, and then it just kind of shifted post-pandemic.
We were over 100, and then they tore down
Oh, that's
the
right.
homes, the Lindsay apartments.
Yeah.
And then people moved back in after that in other places.
Because I'm just thinking if we're steadily seeing 30, 20, 30 students a year increasing, then would that be, just so there could be planning purposes for that being added up?
It's difficult also because when we're talking about multilingual students, we're talking about groups of 20 or more who speak the same language. So right now, we're really speaking about Spanish-speaking
Right.
students, but certainly if we had an influx of students that all spoke Lithuanian or some other language, then we would be responsible for providing the services in that language as well. So there are definitely schools out there that are responsible for having a full-time bilingual program in multiple languages. So it just kind of depends on the population shifts and who's moving into the area. So we have to keep our eye on all of that. And as much as we think about it being our Spanish-speaking students, we could also see shifts that go into different languages, and that we'd have to kind of plan for that differently if we had a group of, let's say, 120 students that needed Spanish bilingual services and 20 students who needed, in a different language. We also are not tied to co-teaching as the method, but that is the way we're able to offer the most classes right now. But there are certainly times when we could be looking to find teachers or find teachers who have both certifications as a bilingual teacher and a content, and then that would help us to have one teacher teaching in the classroom as opposed to two.
Okay.
So there are a lot of factors.
Different subject, unless you had more on that. It was just about the 1.9. So teachers teach 5 classes?
They do.
So ideally, each class is a 0.2, I'm assuming?
Correct.
So how do we get to 0.9? Is that like a supported study hall or something that they?
We'll have semester-based courses, so in many of our departments, social studies, art, there will be a semester course. So we may have, let's say, aviation, we might have 5 sections total of that.
Okay.
So it ends up being imbalanced where you might have 2 sections, 1 semester and 3 another. Overall, the different departments, it generally happens where there will be some shifts like that. But generally speaking, they'll be able to balance them out between shifting things with an Infinite Campus or with other teachers. So we're able to account for
So
that.
they'll be still doing their 5 classes depending on the semester. It's not like you're gonna hire a part-time person. to
No,
do
if there are part-time opportunities that exist, so if we have a department, let's say, where the overall FTE is 22.5, let's say,
Yeah.
we could have 22 full-time teachers and then a 0.5 teacher. But we wouldn't have multiple part-times within that, broken up within that allocation.
that. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. no further questions, then we will have additional information for the Board of Education at the March 17th board meeting. If there's any changes, especially as we continue to work with division chairs and the associate principals and looking at our multilingual numbers, we bring those to the board at the March 17th meeting.
And Ed, can you just talk briefly about what that packet will include for the March 17th meeting? Because it's much more extensive than tonight's packet, obviously.
March 17th will have multiple resolutions with it. It will have resolutions for the release or non-renewal, honorable dismissal, release, non-renewal of certified staff members per school code. It will also have a similar resolution for instructional aides and paraprofessionals, again, per school code. School code talks about any employment decisions have to be done within a particular time frame within the school, so for school year. So for us, that is in the March board meetings. There will also be a recommendation for administrative contract renewal. Those would be for administrators who have already earned tenure within the school district, so they're not, it's not the board re-employing them as employees of the school district for the next year, but rather in the role that they are at. We will have any requests for part-time assignments, which could make some shifts within staffing at that time, and then really just have a much more clarity on some of these these things that are still hanging out there that we still have to finalize, like multilingual and supported classes.
And all dictated by school code and by Senate Bill 7, which is why there's a lot of prescribed deadlines and why we do all this in March.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, but next we're moving on to capstone courses and courses with enrollments under 18, which is a first reading, but back to Ed.
Thank you. So this is very similar to a lot of the materials that you've seen from Scott in his role over the course of the times that he's been in that position, where we're talking about new courses or courses that we'd like to run through the curriculum staff development process. We aren't bringing these courses to the Board of Education tonight for approval as to whether or not we want the board to approve the course, but rather the section. And that's because we have two groups of courses that we want to apply special consideration to when needed, and if at all possible, if we have enrollments that are under that typical threshold of 18 students that have signed up to take the course. We'd like to run those courses if and when possible, but we also know that we need to be responsible about what we're bringing to the Board of Education. So there are two main groups of courses that we want to talk tonight about. The first is capstone courses. Capstone courses, that is the first part of that second memo. Capstone courses are the final courses in a well-defined multi-year sequence within a department. These courses provide students with the opportunity to complete a full program of study in a particular subject area, and every year the Central Leadership Team and the Board of Education review those capstone courses with special consideration given to their enrollment numbers. If possible, and when enrollment allows, we aim to run capstone courses to ensure that students can complete their academic pathways. A full list of recommended capstone courses has been provided to you for your review, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the Board of Education might have about any capstone courses for next year. And then if there's no questions, yeah, that's fine. They all go together between capstone and under 18, so we can.
So the capstone summary, the only one that I was wondering about, and I'm sure there's reason for it, is that teaching internship, elementary 1 and 2.
That's what I was going to ask.
That one's at 35 with 4 sections. Is there a particular reason why those classes need to be smaller, and why we couldn't do that?
There's a couple of things. One, and Scott can certainly talk about our Pathways program. And so that is a course within FCS that is part of our established pathways. That is also a double period within the day. Students are out of the building going to school, going to classes. So it essentially takes what the FTE allocation of another traditional course might be and essentially doubles it. Because, well, not cuts it in half, but doubles it, because now you're going over 2 periods. So this is a class that will typically meet 7th and 8th period each day throughout the entirety of the year.
So it's like a block class.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. And you will see some of these classes may have enrollment under 18 as well, too. The next part goes hand in hand with the capstone course. I'm happy to wait a little bit on capstones, or we can move on to the total enrollment under 18. We move on.
I'm good.
Okay. The second group of courses are courses that don't have any inherent special consideration. They're not necessarily capstone courses. They are just courses that we'd like to run, but they have a total enrollment under 18. Courses that have a total enrollment over 18, we've kept off of this list because we consider that to be healthy enrollment. We're able to run those classes. But there are two main groups of courses that might have total enrollment under 18 that we are recommending for special consideration. Those two exceptions really fall into capstone courses like we just talked about, and specialty courses. And here's what I mean by that. A class like our television station or our radio station, SCUBA, classes that we have the facilities, the curriculum, the sequencing to offer, we want to try to offer those if and when possible. We know that there may be times where those numbers are too low and we can't, but when we can't, we want to be able to run those specialty courses because we know that makes our curriculum unique here at LT. And then we also want to give special consideration to courses that are within that capstone sequence. And here's what I mean by that. If aviation has a 4-course sequence that you have to go through all 4 of those courses, if we don't run course 2 one year, what that does is that essentially cuts off that capstone sequence for those students who are right there. Now, that doesn't mean we will always run it. If there is such a low number, we may not be able to, and we can figure out other ways to help those students hopefully accelerate back into it. But if those numbers are close to the 18, we are going to try to give special consideration to those types of courses and make those recommendations to the board. So a summary of all of those classes that we are asking the board to give special consideration and the recommendation for approval is listed. One thing to keep in mind, supported classes, classes within our special education program, classes within our multilingual program, classes within an alternative program, where we know either school code guidelines, state law, or best practices tell us that those enrollments start below 18. We haven't put those on the list as well, too. Otherwise, we would have multiple pages of classes that we know by design are under 18. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
I had a quick question on this. Does this tend to be fairly on trend with historical under 18 classes?
It does. It does. The individual courses may change year to year in some of these areas, but the overall total number is about the same. And we know that's going to fluctuate from year to year where students may choose one elective over another in any given year. But the overall number is very much on
As
par.
well as the course type?
Yes. Correct. Yes.
Okay.
You'll notice too, or maybe you won't because you don't understand the course numbers, but because we have a split campus, we often have to offer courses at the other campus with lower numbers, or we send all those students to the opposite campus, which is a challenge. So if you look at those world language numbers, that doesn't mean there's only 16 students doing honors Spanish. That means there's only 16 at North. Most of those classes are at South. And so these are students who started Spanish freshman year as opposed to an 8th grade. So many of those that end in a 1 and 2, those are North Campus. So sometimes, not with music, but sometimes it's because it's only offered at one campus for a small number. That's the same for PC repair, computer concepts, Google Suite, and computer apps for business. So those 6 are all because most of the kids take it at the other campus, but we still offer it at this campus.
So they don't commute?
They don't commute.
Okay.
And anytime you put a class 1st or 8th, that limits what they can do with other classes, and so we try to avoid those as much as possible, so.
So, the alternative would be tell those students, you can commute to the campus, but that just presents a lot of challenges that we'd rather offer the section at the campus they're at.
But the number's pretty low, we will do that, but.
Yeah.
these-
16's a healthy number. to do
Is
that.
this what we're projecting for the full school year next year, or is this by semester? Is this listed?
No, this would be for the full
the
year,
full-
yeah.
okay.
And there are some things, particularly if you look at music and you see like concert choir, treble choir, varsity choir, those are audition choirs, or the numbers will fill in based on the results of auditions. So we know that we will have full sections in that at the time of sectioning. We don't have the full numbers, so in, full disclosure of what we have at the time, we want to put them on the list of courses, but we fully expect those performance classes to go well above 18.
18, yeah, okay.
That was my question, the concert choir with the 4, so that one you anticipate that won't be near that number? I don't even know how you run a class with choir
correct.
with 4 people.
Barbershop quartet.
Yeah, I mean, legit.
And Ed, just, do you see like historically that some of the classes, that are newer, maybe take a while to ramp up? Like, how do we, verify if like, okay, enrollments might seem a little bit lower, but that's because this course is new and it's just gaining some traction? Like, do we have kind of like a club, almost like a pilot period that we would allow or would want to consider that?
That's a good question. There isn't any pilot period like we would have for a club, but we would certainly monitor enrollment to see what's happening with that course, just like we would if it was a club or activity. We've had some courses that we've offered, and right from jump, there's hundreds of students, and others that take a little bit of time. So that's where I think our approach of really looking at the enrollments from course to course allows us to focus on those things and make those considerations about, yes, we can run it, and here's the reason why we can run it, or it's still not at that point. We just need to nurture it a little bit more, rather than looking at it, whole system-wise and say, this is our total enrollment, this is what the overall sectioning needs to be, rather than, instead of looking at that micro level course by course. So I think every year we would take a look at it, but we would certainly give everything we could to try to have that course run. It was recommended to the board for approval for a reason, so we would want students to have that opportunity to take it if we could, and it was, fiscally responsible.
Great, yeah, because I was curious about that, because obviously a lot of time and effort and research goes into putting together these courses, and so just, knowing that some things take a while for people to understand or get their
Sure.
kind of get a grasp on it, so.
Actually, fashion merchandising is that very course. Last year it didn't run. We didn't bring it through as an under 18 because it was half even where that was now. But since we haven't run it yet, and we have enough, we will. The question will be, will it take momentum? And next year, will we be looking at this as another under 18, or will it be 25, 32, that sort of thing? But since that is the third in a sequence, and you can get dual credit for it, and it does lead toward a pathway, to see 17 is actually, I thought was a good number.
Great. And we just had added African American Studies in our AP offerings too in the last year, so. Okay.
That's something we consider as well. Music theory is a low number. We're considering offering it every other year, so maybe it runs larger every other year. Anytime you start a new course like AP African American, it has more students in it this year than the second year, because juniors and seniors could take it, so you're really drawing mostly from your junior class, so we'll see. Again, is that gonna oscillate, or will it level out? Usually they level out, but it's always something to look at.
Thanks. I do appreciate us continuing to make this happen. I think it's very important, and it's, I'm really supportive of it, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And again, this is the first read, so this will come back to the Board of Education for that second read. We don't anticipate any changes, but certainly if there are, we would let the board be aware. These numbers, the sections that we've recommended and allocated, or the FTE for these sections, are reflected in that overall FTE of 1.9. So should there be any changes from the board table at the meeting on March 17th, that would just change what those overall numbers are, but I'll have my computer so we can make those changes on the fly, should we need to do that, but we don't anticipate any need.
And we appreciate the board's support in this. It would be very easy to draw a quantitative line and say, below 18, not gonna run it, but for all the reasons that we've talked about tonight, it's important so we appreciate that support.
Thank you, everybody.
So many of these are what? make LT so special too, because we are able to offer these, and it's where kids start to find their passion that they take down the road and outside of here when they leave. So I'm always glad to see all of this come back. Great, thank you. And then our final HR item is the 2025-26 school psychologist staffing proposal. Dr. Owens.
Thank you, President Gretsch. The proposal is in your board packet. It's starting on page 9, and there is a lot of information in the proposal, including some historical information. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I will go through the more salient points and talk through the proposal, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. But just to give a brief history, we have historically obtained our school psychologists through our co-op LADSI, and we have traditionally had 3 full-time psychologists here at LT, which is under the recommended ratio. The National Association of School Psychs recommends a 1 psychologist to every 500 student ratio. Certainly we have not met that ratio, and actually for the last 2 years we've requested 4 psychologists through LADSI, but they have been unable to meet that request. So there's also been significant turnover within our psych group through LADSI over the past 10 years. So of the 31 positions that have been posted, 7 psychologists have resigned after a year, 2 after 3 years, 1 after 4, and a few others after a few more years. And so that turnover has really limited the scope of the work that psychs have been able to do within our school system. And we don't get a lot of traction because just in time for us to get to know a psychologist, for them to start to get to know LT, it seems that they're leaving. And so it's created just a very narrow scope of work within our special education division really only, and less using our psychologists and their other skills within the rest of our school population. So the concerns regarding these positions have been mutual concerns between both us and LADSI, and this proposal has included multiple conversations with both the executive director at LADSI, Ellie Ambule, as well as Sue Gallagher, who is the supervisor for the psychologist. So it certainly has been a mutual conversation. Just additionally, Ed Pietrowski conducted a survey of other high schools in this region, and we are an outlier in terms of staffing full-time psychologists through a co-op. So therefore, the proposal before you is for LT to directly hire 4.0 FTE school psychologists for next school year. And there's some information in terms of school psychologist training and preparation and where they kind of come in on the salary schedule, and in terms of, like I said, salary and their years of experience. But essentially what is at the core of this is being able to provide 4 psychologists to our school community, which will really even out or round out our student support teams and allow us to have a professional at each grade level that is expert not only in doing the evaluations for special education, and those are certainly required, and a psychologist is required on those teams, but also with our 504 plans, and then so much other work and expertise that school psychs have in terms of data analysis, progress monitoring in terms of interventions, planning for interventions, working with general education staff to make sure that our Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 MTSS system is really robust. They provide a lot of leadership in terms of that kind of work in a team setting. And so again, we feel that at this time this would really benefit our entire school population, all of our students, not just a small portion of our students, and would allow us to get some traction with some really high quality candidates. So in a nutshell, that's the proposal. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has about it.
I've got a few questions.
Sure.
And I don't, I apologize up front if I'm just a little ignorant, because we haven't talked about this before, but first of all, are we within the normal scope of school districts who hire through a co-op as opposed to hiring directly through the school, or is that kind of the norm?
At the high school level, we're one of only 2 high schools in the entire region that still obtains full-time school psychologists through a co-op.
Okay. And the others?
Hire directly.
Hire directly. So that leads me to my second question, which is, do you think that that contributes to this turnover rate through LADSI? I mean, is that something that we have considered here at LT in changing? Has that ever come up?
I can't speak to any conversations at the board level before I was here in this seat, but I don't think that's ever been brought to the Board of Education. I think it absolutely contributes to the turnover. I mean, to be frank, there's a pay differential typically between what high school districts pay and even elementary districts and co-ops. So
There's number three.
when psychologists can go to other high school districts if they're interested in working in a high school and be hired directly for more robust compensation. I
Right.
think that's certainly a factor for many. And within a co-op, there's usually an average applied in terms of salary, and that includes all the districts within the co-op. So there's elementary district salaries, high school district salaries, and then, you know, our related services sort of end up in the middle there, or at the average.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong, they don't pay into the pension either, do they?
Say that
Through
again?
they're not part of the TRS?
They are.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Through LADSI, you mean? Is that?
Through
Yes.
LADSI?
Yep, through LADSI you do, yeah, you do,
Okay.
you collect a pension.
Paul, I don't ever recall this board talking about this.
Ever
at
having
least
that
in 11
discussion?
years.
Can I ask then, as long as it's on the table for discussion right now, I mean, is that something that you guys would like to see happen? Is that a change that you feel would be beneficial to the district so that maybe we can start to slice into that turnover a little bit and see some more consistency as we start to see more issues? I think more issues with our student population and the need for having more psychologists on board. I mean, is that?
No, I mean, that is the proposal, like, we want to hire 4 of our own psychs versus
Yeah.
using the special ed cooperative, so that.
And get out of the co-op.
That is,
Yeah.
well,
That is
just
the
from a
proposal.
psych, not,
for that.
not everything else, not anything else, just the psych.
Just the psych
Just psychs,
portion.
yep,
Got it.
We have
Okay.
a really strong partnership with LADSI, and again, that's why part of these conversations started in last year and working with the leadership at LADSI. So there's not, you know, bad blood there or anything.
Right,
It's
of
simply
course.
that the turnover is really impacting the services that are provided, and it's a, I'll call it a burden on LADSI too, to try to go through that hiring and onboarding, and then we are going through the, secondary hiring and onboarding of that group each year. Only then for people to leave, it becomes very difficult to get that momentum and for our students to reap the benefits of those
Sure.
services. So that is certainly the recommendation and
Okay.
certainly what we hope to see.
Perfect.
The only thing I would say, if you're only hiring 4, and if it's recommended 1 to 500 students, really given our enrollment, it should be more like 8, right?
Yes, those numbers always come with a bit of caution, I guess I'll say. It really depends on the needs of your system, too. So while any professional organization is going to give you those guidelines to follow, and those are really good guidelines to be aware of, you also have to take into consideration the needs of your population, your specific school population. So I think this recommendation of 4 is very reasonable and would
Oh, that's
provide
right.
the services we need. It would allow us to follow that grade level model of our teams going from, you know, class to class and rounding out those teams. And I really think we would be in a good spot with 4. We have a lot of other supports here too, and I'm certainly so grateful for the support we've had for those supports. So I think when you look at that as a whole and not just simply
We're not
what
gonna be under.
correct, yeah.
Okay. And I think it's actually really great having a child that's used the psych, you know what I mean? That we always had so much turnover. From that. You were like, who's here now?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like,
This is meant to
Yes.
alleviate that,
I
hopefully.
think that will be great. I mean, just as, you know, like, always had LADSI psychs throughout that. And I would be like, oh, we had you in kindergarten, and now you're back in high school. I mean, just to have that continuity, I think would be amazing
Yeah.
to have them in-house.
And yeah, to that point, because one of the comments that you made in this proposal, which I also really appreciate, is that, you know, you're talking about whether or not that they would be following a class, and I know that that's something that you guys are gonna have to probably work out. So that might even be something that maybe you'll try it a certain way and then sort of reevaluate and reassess after a year, or if you've gone through a cycle, or you think you'll have to plan that. I mean.
We
you
have
guys
some
can-
flexibility
okay.
with that always, and I've been working with Melissa Moore, who's the Division Chair for Special Education, and Drew Eater, Division Chair for Student Services, and we've had preliminary conversations about what that would look like, where everybody would be assigned, and again, our typical process for those, I'll call it part of the SST team, is that they follow a grade level. Certainly, we can make adjustments to that as needed, but it does seem that potentially that would be the best way to start, and even if that was to cycle through so that every psych had experience with all the different grade levels, because there really are unique needs at each grade level, and even the buildings can be unique, so it's
Right.
hard to keep someone from that experience. It's good to have the comprehensive experience of the whole kind of high school here, but we can certainly always make adjustments as we see fit.
And it's that consistency point too, like how, you know, Jill was talking about, just having that consistent point of contact too for the families and like for the students and stuff. There's a lot of value in that, so. And then I appreciate too that, you know, you're taking and understanding, you know, what are all of the skill sets and what are all the other services that LADSI provides, and, you know, keeping that intact and just, you know, kind of like focusing in on where we can kind of smooth that whole like transition, that package for our families and our students, because that's, you know, a big priority. And that consistency is just so important and critical for those 4 years that they're here with us, so.
Sure.
Thanks for thinking and putting this together, and I'm glad that it was worked through with LADSI's input, because we really do value them and
Yep.
have used them for such a long time as a
For
great
sure.
partner, so.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I have a couple questions. The 3 existing LADSI ones, are they located here full-time between the
They
2 campuses?
They are,
So I know you,
So they commute, I mean, we sort of have one set at each campus and one who commutes, but that doesn't always work out, just given that it's imbalanced and
Okay.
kind of where the needs are. Usually we have more initial evaluations at South Campus, reevaluations each year. These are the required sort of special ed pieces for psychologists, can fluctuate in number. So it's kind of flexible.
okay. And I know you guys are talking about space and where we'd house them. The other question is, so we were allocated 3, or we wanted 4, and we only used 3. So I'm assuming if we were able to find and hire 4 for next year, if this proposal goes through, I saw the additional, or the expectations of work that we would have them do. How much of what was listed in there with MTSS, with providing mental health supports, 504s, were our existing 3 psychologists from LADSI doing?
Almost none of that.
Okay.
They've really been providing special education services. They do sit on our SST teams, but I'd say more in a consultant type position rather than feeling like a full member of the team. And as our MTSS kind of structure falls into place, or we start planning more for that, you know, hiring would allow us to use their expertise within that. That's not being used. Again, because they've been hired through LADSI, they've really been allocated within special education, and it's just
Yeah.
such a much more narrow scope. It's a very antiquated and
Testing only, right?
Yes,
That's all they're doing.
testing and being at meetings with the report. So, and certainly there are those needs, and those are important, and they will continue to maintain all of that compliance, but there's so many other needs within a school that a site can provide, so.
And then, so the work that would be taken off, so MTSS, we're using their expertise to have a much more strong MTSS model, right? That makes a lot of sense to me. Reevaluations of mental health, I'm curious what that looks like, and, sorry, two-part question. If we're taking off some of those 504, is that taking responsibilities off our counselors for them to be able to push in more with other kids, or how do you see that balance?
We have a 504 coordinator right now, but she is one person to over 550 504 plans.
Yeah.
So we do see them providing some support in running some of those 504 potentially reevaluations or initials. We'd have to see what the breakdown would most make sense at that grade level. Our counselors are really seen as the case managers of the 504, so they do a lot of the interface with the teachers, and that seems very appropriate. Each counselor has, you know, no more than, I think, 20 students with 504s on their caseload, which is a reasonable number when you're thinking about just communicating with teachers the plan, making sure people have their questions answered. Families do call counselors for questions about accommodations and things, but Kate Walgan, with the assistant division chair, handles all the meetings at this time.
Okay.
So it would certainly help to relieve some pressure there. Kate has a lot of other duties as assistant division chair, so that would help there. And I think help bring some of that back to the team and let the team problem solve, you know, what they need to.
And then the mental health services, what, do you anticipate what that would look like? Would they be helping out with our SOS? Would they be helping out with some of those other initiatives that we're trying to
Sure.
get up and running?
I think, our plan would be to have them housed within our student services division. So right now, whenever, SOS is an example of kind of all hands on deck, they would certainly be a part of that. I think, again, we've got such great social work support. They are doing a lot of tier 3 groups, tier 2 groups. I could see our psychs, and again, talking with Drew Eater and Melissa Moore, see them taking on some potentially groups or individual tier 3 services as needed. It would just kind of depend on the need at each grade level, but certainly they have the background to be able to do that if necessary. We don't want to necessarily take anything away from somebody who's running groups and has established relationships with students, but where there's need, we can use their support.
I think your old model with LADSI is antiquated. I think this is a great idea. I think it will be able to provide a ton of resources for our families, so
Absolutely.
I think it's a great idea.
It's a no-brainer.
Great work on it. I mean, I think there's just a lot of,
Great proposal.
Thank you.
Thoroughly
you.
thought out.
And there's no concerns in filling these positions, I assume?
I don't think there would be a concern, honestly. I think as a standalone, direct hire district psychologist would be very excited to be working here and be part of our teams.
I think so too.
So we'll bring this back
Should
on
come back on
17th.
the 17th, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to move into curriculum and instruction, and we'll begin with the first reading of the 2025 summer workshop. Scott Eagerding.
All right, thank you, President Crutch. You do have quite a bit of information in the packet. I just wanted to take you through really the logic behind it and give you a sense of what we do in the summer, which, as you can see, is quite a bit. One of the things we do come to you each year for is for summer workshops. This is extra work. This is not required of anyone, but it does give teaching teams and other initiatives opportunity to have some focus time to get some work done. In our contract with the Faculty Association, the pay is at $45 an hour for those on the high end. So, and it's a little lower for those who are relatively new to the district. What we do, though, is we estimate everything on the high end. So everything, assuming that everyone is on at the $45 an hour level. So when you look at those numbers, that's what those are based on. One of the things we also do, and we're starting this now for next summer, the summer of '26, is we do look at using our grant funds to offset the costs for many of these things, and we usually do that for major initiatives. So you'll look at the 33 workshops that my office received, really put them through 5 buckets, so to speak. Current curriculum review was something we budgeted for. And you'll notice when we get down to that there are 57 teachers who would be involved in that for up to $37,000, and that is all being paid for by Title I and Title II. There are also district initiatives. We have 2 workshops for restorative practices that would be coming out of grants. We also have some other things that wouldn't necessarily come out of grants, but are major initiatives, including our English language development training. Again, not only do we have multilingual students, but we have students who speak another language at home but are not considered multilingual as far as the supports and services they need, but who are still not, could still use more supports in their classrooms with learning the English language. We also support new courses and significant changes to courses. This happens from time to time. You'll see, in particular, this year, we are splitting our Heritage Speakers class from an alternating every other year curriculum to having a 1 and a 2 at the same time. So that's going to take a little bit of work by those instructors. So that would be a significant change. And then our new courses, Baking and Pastry, has 9 sections, which is awesome. As I keep telling everybody, North Campus is going to smell good next year. So they need to develop that course as well. We have tried to support prior year curriculum review. There are some teams that have made some major changes and want to go back and see how they've gone. Others need to finish some of the work throughout the year, so we built some of that in. Every year, AP comes up with new curriculum for some class, and so we need to give the teachers some time to work on that. And more with our over 30 dual credit courses, the colleges are looking for updates and upgrades as well. So that's really been the process we looked at for those 33 workshops. We can certainly support others as well, but there are some that maybe for a new course it's not going to run. We're not going to run that workshop. Or if it's something that we felt that we could figure out we could cover by Institute Day, early dismissal, and PLCs, perhaps that would be a better use of the time of those teachers. We also try to consider the challenges of this many workshops, and I've made it really clear to the chairs that it is a concern of mine. For this summer, we have a lot of construction. North Campus is going to be mostly out of commission, and we're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 people doing workshops over the course of 2 weeks. So we know there's going to be conflicts. We know not all of these are going to run. So that being said, as we've looked at the financials in years past, what gets approved, only about 80% of it actually gets spent. I see there being even more conflicts this year, and I would, if I were handicapping this, I'd say we'd be closer to 70 to 75%. But in any case, I think it is still good work. It's always great to have a whole team there, but you don't need a whole team there. You know, the work can still get done, especially as it's written. So I did list out some of the highlights. We are starting again that next round of co-teaching. So those co-teaching partners, the gen ed and the co-teacher teaching pair getting to know each other. Our building restorative culture training. We have level 1 for those who haven't been through it yet, and level 2 who did it last year that Dr. Terrell is leading. Dr. Rowe is working with a cultivating curriculum workshop, again, bringing those culturally responsive lessons into the regular classroom, our multilingual teaching teams. Last year was sophomore for curriculum review, so we have some of those sophomore teams continuing, not all. This year is juniors, and most of those junior teams will be continuing over the summer. Doing some planning for professional learning, the new courses, dual credit updates, AP psychology, and doing some other student-centered math and science lessons. So again, a lot of that was outgrowth of the curriculum review, so they're not really doing curriculum review, they're actually doing curriculum rewriting and revision, trying to come up with more engaging lessons and activities. So in a nutshell, the proposals as presented total $165,375 with $96,750 earmarked to be paid by grants and a trust. We also have a science a benefactor who is giving us and has been giving us money for support in science for innovative teaching. So we're using that for the science lessons. And then we also, the remainder, $68,625 would come from district funds. When you compare that to previous years, which is on page 17, we are asking for a little less than last year and a lot more in grants. I was able to really focus more on those grants this year, especially as we've shifted some things that had been on grants into regular expenses. So the district cost is right around where it was last year, so a tiny bit higher as far as the actual being proposed now. I requested nearly $100,000 from the district last year, and you'll notice we only spent $65,000. So lots of information. As you look through the summaries that begin on page 18, you get a sense of what the teams are planning to do. And again, I think it really represents the depth and breadth of what we're trying to accomplish with meeting the needs of our students, offering innovative programming and updating our core curriculum. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about specific workshops or the process in general, if you have any questions. This is a first read, so I'll be asking for approval depending on any changes that we make between now and the 17th.
Scott, just one quick question. You mentioned like facilities, obviously with a lot of construction and stuff this summer. Is it possible to have some of these workshops go and have them at a remote location? I mean, is that something that we've considered, like, I don't know if that would help more of the workshops be able to actually come to fruition or not? Like maybe go to a middle school or something?
It's something we've considered. I mean, maybe not going to a middle school, but, you know, can they work on it remotely? What we found is that the work gets done better when it's here, rather than having, you know, one year we had some teams like, well, I'm gonna do this part and they'll do that part, and they never really met. And it didn't really, you know, we didn't really feel we got.
Well, that's why I suggested
Yeah.
like in middle school, like you are meeting, you're just not meeting
Yeah.
here, you're meeting, yeah,
You
I
know,
know
the good
exactly what
thing,
you
the
mean.
good thing is at South now, we don't use all the classrooms for summer school, and they're mostly all air conditioned. So, you know, teams are able
There
to
you
get
go.
into a classroom and work and not,
Okay.
you know, and not be really uncomfortable. So in the past, there were just a few spots where you could go, and we were kind of stacking them around that. Our larger spaces, D103, 140, 137, the study hall rooms, those will be those larger trainings will happen there. We're hoping we can use 140 and 137 and 251 here in North, but we'll know more from when we get closer as far as construction, what weeks are going to be. We'll have power and water at North, and when we won't.
Right.
So,
Yeah, because I don't know, I mean, if it's the difference between being able to get more workshops done.
Sure.
If it's a possibility for them to meet at one of our feeder schools or something like that, just to be able to kind of collaborate, I think it'd be great.
They're not using it.
Was that?
If they don't use it themselves, that's.
Right.
that's the same.
Right, and I mean, most of their staff is a fraction of what we've got here, just because it's so big, right? So, I don't know, just a thought. Thank you.
The only question I had was the cultivating curriculum. Not the first time, right? We've done this for a while. I love it. What if you have more than 18 teachers that want to do it? And do you, I guess,
Yeah,
historically?
we have so much overlap. That's been the best thing about our summer workshops, and it's like the time. We often have more teachers, but because of when it's offered, it's been working out.
Okay.
So,
Knock on wood,
because
you're
some
not
of them
gonna-
have another workshop, or they're traveling. So we've been very fortunate we started, I think, at 14, and we were able to push it up, and then we fluctuated down a couple
Okay.
because of overlap. So we've been in really great shape, and so appreciate the support.
Yeah, it sounds.
It's a good point, too. Essentially, what I'm asking for is a not-to-exceed number, and you'll
Okay.
notice we've never exceeded it.
Yeah.
But it does include those types of tradings. So we may say, hey, 3 people can't make it to this one, but now 2 new people have to teach this class. Can we add them to that workshop? And we do.
Okay.
So, you know, when Mary Alice in my office and I start getting the communication out to staff and getting them to commit, then the chairs are saying, hey, can I have 3? I'm gonna give up 2, et cetera.
Okay. So
Generally
we
have
swap 'em
5
out if we
more
have
that
to.
wanna do restorative than we estimated last spring, and so,
Make it happen.
yeah, we'll make that happen, so, there you go.
Thank you.
So it's pretty much based on some realistic expectations of
Yeah.
like historically. And
Yeah, we're always amazed that it comes in around 80%. It's
Yeah.
just one of those
Yeah.
things, but we know there's, you know, they're actually making summer plans now. So, you know, when we
Right.
approve this in 2 weeks, some people will already say, oh, I've already booked the trip, or
Yeah.
my son's graduating, or, you know, there's a wedding, and, you know, you can't do much about that.
It's all
Yeah.
optional.
Yeah.
It's all
right.
optional
Yeah,
for
and
the
it's all
teachers who do it,
optional.
so.
Great. A lot of work.
And yeah, I was gonna say, and Scott, like on that note about it being a lot of work, like the grant process, I mean, like, just how many, different grant resources are you trying to reach when you're putting something like this
Well,
together to get the support?
It's probably sounds more complicated than it is. We have 2 basic grants that we fund workshops from. Title I, which is for low-income students who struggle, closing achievement gaps, and Title II, which is on staff development. So between those 2, I try to balance what we pull things from. The grant rules change from time to time. You used to not be able to use Title I for languages or for CTE or any of those kinds of things, and now you can. So we've got a little more flexibility. And we'll find out too, like we've budgeted through the grant for, say, tutoring, and we may find out in when we get closer to the end of May, we haven't used all that money. So we can then siphon some of that money off from district costs into that. So it's really more of a massaging.
Yeah.
It's not like, if you're used to nonprofit work, it's not like we're asking a not-for-profit
Right.
organization to give us money. It's all federal dollars. Now, that being said, you never know how much you're gonna get from the state or actually from the federal government. At least from what I work with Title I and Title II, it's around $300,000, give or take, from year to year. So it's a good amount, but it's not like we couldn't ultimately absorb it if we had to. But we want to make sure we spend it, so
Right.
that's what we play around with. So right now, I'm submitting an amendment, the second amendment of the year, to capture things that we're not going to spend money on this year, request other
Yeah.
things, and bring in. That's how I was able to get more money for the summer workshops, so.
And the grants are also fairly restrictive in terms of what we can use them for.
Right.
Yeah.
So there isn't just, hey, here's the money and go and spend it. It's
Right.
it really is a
Falls
pretty
into
narrow
this
focus
category.
in terms of what we can spend those grant dollars on.
Right, but couldn't it also change in the next couple of months depending on where the Department of Education sits?
This year's monies won't change, because they've all been allocated by Congress. Next year's very well could. Yeah,
Okay.
it's very possible we get less money for next year. We won't know those allocations for a little while yet, but that would have to be, those allocations have to come by an act of Congress, and so we'll all be watching.
The majority of our federal funding comes from, for special education. Through IDEA, which is about $900,000 a year. And then for federal special ed room and board, which is probably another $400,000 to $500,000 a year. And then the rest is what Scott was talking about. So that's just kind of a nutshell. About $1.5 million is what we receive in federal funding annually. And again, 80% of that is for special ed related services.
But summer workshops are a great use of that money.
Absolutely.
Because we get a lot of benefit out of it.
Absolutely.
I'm glad our staff participates
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
so robustly.
having teachers that want to do multiple workshops is, I think, a good problem to have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's some people who'll be here pretty much every day for 2 full weeks.
Great. Continuous learning.
Love that.
Hence our high
Love
retention
hearing
rate.
about that. Yeah. Right.
And sorry, last point on that is I like the idea, especially in that cultivating curriculum, where they bring it back to their colleagues. They're creating materials that they can share then with their colleagues. I think that shared responsibility is phenomenal.
Yeah, and at our Institute Day in March, Dr. Rose coordinating an event for some of that sharing to happen
Yeah.
as a sharing symposium with all their
Great.
teammates.
We were just talking about that. We're really excited. It's been amazing, the energy, and I think in our meeting this morning, it was amazing how our science teachers were so excited, and they were discussing the impact of being in that space with the art teachers and some of the other English and social studies teachers collaborating together, and how it shapes the product, like the lessons that they presented. So it was really cool. So they're ready to go for this summer.
That's great. That's great.
Well, this is great. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Scott. Okay, and then our final item is the 5-year technology plan, taking us through 2030. So Dr. Waterman.
Yeah, I just want to say kind of a few brief remarks to kind of set some context here. But in spring of 2020, previous boards, a couple boards ago, approved a 5-year technology plan that started in 21 and obviously is sunsetting at the end of this year. So talked with Ed Tennant last summer, as you know, this also connects to Goal 5 of our strategic plan, and then obviously Scott has a integral part in this too from an instructional perspective. But the goal this year was to go through a community engagement process in the fall to get input on kind of where we're at with technology, and then develop a new plan that will help guide our efforts the next 5 years. I think the most important thing to understand is that this is not a plan that's meant to provide every last detail for what we want to do over the next 5 years. it's more or less a plan to use, for us to use as a guiding document with overarching goals that we can then use to plan those details over the next 5 years. So I'll kind of let the group jump in here in a second, but essentially, Ed conducted a series of focus groups, listening sessions throughout the fall with students and staff to kind of get an idea of what we want the next iteration of this to look like. You saw in the document that then Scott added the alignment to the 2024 National Education Technology Standards, which you always want to anchor your goals in something, and so they did that. And then again, there's 7 overall goals that we can then use over the next 5 years to, as we look at technology purchases and technology implementation, we can use this document to kind of guide our efforts. And I think the big things that came up the last 5 years, obviously, we were thrust into the distribution of a one-to-one Chromebook implementation with the pandemic. Wi-Fi and infrastructure, significant amount of Wi-Fi and infrastructure upgrades have happened over the last 5 years. New phone system, pretty significant safety updates around like camera usage and things like that have been sort of the hallmarks of the last 5 years. And again, this document will allow us to plan out the next 5 years. So with that, Ed, I'll let you jump in first to kind of talk through the infrastructure, what you learned in the focus groups, and then we can have Scott talk about the instructional side.
Yeah, so, thank you. First of all, before we even get into any of that, I don't often have the opportunity to address the entire board, but I would just like to say, on behalf of my team and me and those that benefit from our work, thank you to the board for all of the support and the guidance. Sometimes a random hallway conversation elicits a big spark of an idea towards a change, and we are always looking for those opportunities. But the direct support that has come, especially in the last few years, as we had to make major changes. We were sitting upstairs in the study hall when the question was asked, you've loaned out a lot of equipment in the last couple of months. Do you think you can get us to one-to-one for the start of next school year? And we looked at the calendar, like, you mean 8 months? We had a 3-year plan to get that done. And you know, a lot of work by a lot of very smart people, not me, I'm talking about other members of our team, made that happen. But it started with you all asking the right questions and you all providing the support, and then consistentizing the funding, and that was a huge element of it. So when we looked at, or when we had our listening sessions, and we met with student groups, the principal student advisory committee, the equity teams, we met with staff groups, district administrative team, but buildings and grounds teams, and groups of teachers, and across everywhere, and then even into the community with the LTCAC, we did a session with them. We really did it as a what's working, what's not working, what have you seen at other places that you would like us to investigate more, and what kind of what future looking things can we identify here. And so in the document there, you see some of the major themes of that feedback. What I would like to pluck from there actually is not hardware and software. It's the concept of consistency. And it touches upon hardware and software, but it also touches upon practice. And you know, I'm a tech guy. I'm not an educator by trade. I didn't get an undergrad degree in education of any sort. But it comes across really strongly in all of the feedback that consistency is our greatest opportunity moving forward. And so the commitment to funding our technology allows us to do more in that regard. If you think about it, we're a really big school. We're a really small district. That puts us in a unique point of operation. But it also means that even though we only have, 500 employees, 300 and whatever are what do you call them? Certificated employees. What ends up happening is you include the 4,000 students, we have to employ enterprise-ready solutions because we have to do everything. We can't say, oh, well, we can experiment in that one little elementary school over there, and it's not going to impact anybody else. When we do a solution, it has to be for the entire student body, 4,000 kids. We can't just say, oh, we're going to do that for a couple hundred kids, because a good idea is a good idea for all kids. So I throw that in there just as kind of the overarching there. From an infrastructure, from a hardware software perspective, we've done a lot of things in the last 5 years in terms of implementing better operations of the LMS, the student information system, the business and HR information system, taking the pressure off of our own on-site data centers and making those vendor or cloud-hosted solutions so that we're survivable even if we have a problem at the local school site. We still have access to that. That means that we can address students on-site, students off-site, employees on-site, employees off-site, doing whatever they need to do to keep the school running. And that was a huge change in our operations as well. And so when we look at that, there was a lot of generally positive feedback in the changes that we were making. But I go back to that word consistency. Where we can grow is in that concept of consistency and bringing that into the classroom, into the strategies that the teachers and other staff members are using. I want to jump in now with some of the
Sure.
goal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at goals, again, the whole point of this is not to say we want this type of laptop or we want that type of Wi-Fi system. It's to figure out what do we want our technology to do, and that's something that I've always liked about Ed's perspective on this. It doesn't matter what the technology is; it's that it solves your problem, that you can use it. So we need the tools in the classroom. So in looking at other schools' tech plans and sort of looking at what we saw in the feedback, we came up with these 7 goals. Collaboration, communication is key, and I think that's something that technology is ideal for. It's also how do we ensure that students are engaged and that they're not just focused on the tech, but that it's a tool for exploration, for learning. Goal 2 being anytime, anywhere, and future ready. We found this obviously through the pandemic, but this is something that we've continued throughout. If a student doesn't have Wi-Fi at home, we give them Wi-Fi so they can take it home. If they don't have a laptop, we give them a laptop. All those things, we want to make sure that when a teacher makes an assignment, every student has access to it, no matter where they are. We also want to make sure it's future ready, and that's always easier said than done. We don't know what the next device is going to be or what the new thing is, and we'll certainly over the course of the next 5 years see something we didn't plan for, right? So, but just being in that mode of innovation and development. AI was not anything we thought about. We weren't even thinking one-to-one, much less AI. Now we got,
And that was only 5 years ago.
exactly. So. Rethinking learning space design. This is, one of the great things about the Groundwork for a Brighter Future campaign is we started talking about what would a classroom look like? How would we redesign the school? And that includes what's in the walls and what's connected, and how can we do things differently? If teachers really want to rearrange the space in a classroom, how do we do that with the technology? How do kids charge? How do we project? Do we want sound amplification? Do we want recordability? All those kinds of things are things we want to really think about. So as we continue into the next phase of our Groundwork for a Brighter Future, that's definitely, it should be an important decision and not an afterthought. And so we wanted to make sure that was a goal. Community and global connections. Our communities certainly have wanted to know more. In talking to parents, they want to know better how to use the Chromebooks or understand their students' Chromebooks. Also, you'll notice in the feedback, every user, from the parent, the student, to the teacher, wants more training. They want to know better how to use all the tools. So we do have technology coaches, which is great. How do we improve those connections? And more we're seeing the tools being used for global connections, for connecting with students in other parts of the world or with other links to curriculum in other areas, all that is great, and we want to continue and improve that. Online safety, security, and responsibility, while we certainly have improved the number of cameras and those and the Blue Point system and all that, which is very good, cybersecurity is growing as a threat, and that's something that I know Ed has been concerned about, not to the point of we're exposed but we have to be deliberate about it. And more and more schools are creating a cybersecurity position in their IT staff. It's something we're looking at as well. So again, as we look at this as a component of the future, with relatively easy access to a lot of student information, we don't want that to be overtaken. Again, digital equitable access, just making sure that we are ensuring equity, that our students, any student, regardless of their socioeconomic status or anything else, has the access to the tools that they need. One of the coolest things, again, talking a little bit about AI, but also with our multilingual, is all the translation services we're finding and just some of the great ways that kids can connect, where in the past it would have been the teacher talking and the kid sitting there and not having a tool to do anything with that. And ultimately, the staffing and support. Are we right-sized? I think Ed makes a great point. We are small and big all at the same time. I would say we have one of the smaller IT staffs of a high school with a split campus. Certainly, adds some of that challenge as well. So how do we maximize our staff and the support? Do we need more support for kids? Do we need a kid drop-in center to teach them how to use the tools better? Do we need more instructional coaches, all that sort of thing? And again, it's always easy to say we want more, but is it the right more? And is it getting to our goals? So we think we've got most of the big things covered in these goals. Again, you'll notice what these goals don't say. It doesn't talk about what software or, that goes through our curriculum process. That goes through our instructional coaches. We do send them to conferences to see what's going on. We do get them, and the really great thing is they have been presenting. Two of our instructional coaches have now presented 3 times on AI and what we're doing with AI here, which we're very excited about, but it's not ubiquitous throughout the school, and certainly we would like to grow some of that. And we'll continue to look at how we bridge that gap and ensure that we're getting teachers everything that they need, and so that it's not a haves and have-nots. So this classroom and this teacher does it. This classroom, this teacher doesn't. How do we roll that out so it's more consistent? So certainly would be happy to take any questions that you have of regarding the goals or what we might mean by some of these things. You'll see it. Ed also provided in that roadmap for the future the big picture. The things that we're going to have to replace every few years, and the right now costs, maybe roughly kind of budgeting big picture numbers,
Right.
Knowing full well that things might change. But just so, again, we're looking at what the student use, Chromebooks, Infinite Campus, Canvas, ClassLink, Google subscription, that's the actual software, things that they're connected to. Skyward has everything to do with HR and the business office. All the other stuff that there is that cybersecurity, and then we have some specialty labs, because Chromebooks are great, but they can't do everything. We have non-instructional PCs and office spaces, and then we replace our staff laptops as well. And one of the things, and I know sometimes, and we have teachers who come here from other schools, they're like, where's the smart board? Where's the interactive whiteboard? We don't use those. We use tablets. Teachers can move about the room more frequently with a tablet. They have all the tools that a smart board would have. And now with Vivi, which is what we're using to display even here at board meetings, teachers can give students permission from their laptop to put it up on the board and to work at their desk and demonstrate rather than standing in front of the picture and that sort of stuff. So it's one of those things that is relatively unique to our model, but it's something that makes it a little more cost-effective, and we feel is more interactive and actually better usable. Ed and I went to a showcase a couple weeks ago, and we saw all the brand-new things, and what they're doing now on these interactive whiteboards is they're giving you like a little keypad so you can interact with it. We're like, well, that's a laptop, and we have it. So, so we're good there. So, but anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions and certainly get your input on anything.
One other comment I would like to make, and Scott being humble in some of this, is when we started looking at the national tech plan and talking through some of that, the very natural connections to anchor points within our own strategic plan. There was not an element of the national tech plan that was out there that we couldn't tie back to an initiative we were already doing in the district. And so I actually felt really pleased as that as an organization we were, we didn't intentionally start with the strategic plan looking at a national tech plan, but the idea that they do align from the concept of what's important to students, what's important to families, what's important to the future of where our students need to go. It came out through that process.
So that's in Appendix 1, and at the end of each one of those bullet points in parentheses is where that bullet point lives in our strategic plan. Or it could be enhanced. It may not be perfect, but at least we know where it should go. No, that's good. And if you're really nerdy, Appendix 2 lists all the stuff that we have.
How, remind me again in the listening sessions, I'm sorry if I didn't pick up on it, like how did you talk to kids, faculty, parents?
Yeah, so the list is, so basically from the end of September through middle of November, we did talk to those groups. Where did that go? So we did talk to the principal student advisory committee, all students, right? And we did multiple sessions with multiple groups of students. The Student Equity and Belonging Committee, Dr. Rowe helped to coordinate that with some students to ensure that we heard all voices across the district, things that are working, because there are vast differences within our own communities of what people have access to. You know, you do have those families that say, well, I could provide a laptop for my student that is way more feature rich than what you're providing as a Chromebook. And then there are others that it's a stretch to have a smartphone, and so, we did look at the Chromebook element. Our technology services leadership team, the people that help me make decisions on a daily basis and help investigate solutions when things are out there. Our tech coaches, the Equity Ambassador Group, that's a group of staff teachers that have insights into the way things are being used in classrooms and how things are working or not for them. District administrative team, LTCAC, we had a great session with that group of individuals. And again, that kind of happened there. I didn't list them because I didn't want to necessarily pull them out, but now I will in an even more public forum. But the Cyber Defense Club kids, I pull them all the time to ask questions. Last year, as we were working through the idea of what the one-to-one devices were going to be, I gave them an assignment and I said, I want you to go out, here's some basic parameters about a device. We know we want it to have this much RAM, this much memory, this much, this about this size of a screen. Now, go look out in the marketplace and tell me what you like and what you don't like about different ones. And we got into some fairly interesting discussions, some pretty heated discussions among the students of things that they liked, whether bigger than an 11.6-inch screen was an asset or a liability. And there were responses of, you've got to be kidding. Do you know how hard it is to fit that in my backpack already? Do you want me to break another screen? And then there were the kids that were pro stylus. and then the ones that were anti-stylus. And so this year, actually, we did the exercise again just a couple of weeks ago, and their reactions are very different now. And they came in and said, you know, the stylus would actually add in my math class or my science class a lot of ability to do formulaic work. But I don't think you should make it something for everyone, because there are a lot of kids, and there were a bunch of them that raised their hand in the club that said, I'll lose it. And I don't want to be responsible for a device like that. There's other ones that are like, dude, I am the kind of person that I'll close it in the cover and I'll break the screen or something like that. So if you are gonna do it, can you at least make sure that, you know, it's garaged in the frame of the device somewhere or something along those lines? And so the feedback from them was incredible of just their perspective. And the differences, and whether they're, you know, taking art classes or engineering classes or where they're going, and all of those types of experiences really help shape a lot of that. So when you're asking who, every conversation somewhere, you know, the buildings, like I said, I actually sat down with the buildings and grounds leadership teams at both campuses because they couldn't figure out a time to get together at the same time. And what is working, what's not working for you as well. And they're like, we need a smaller device that can still connect to the network when we're in the tunnel, so that we have an online view of what this piece of equipment and the manual is. So when I'm working on it, and just like working on it at home, you know, I need to be able to see that video of how this belt or this filter was changed. Because I've never done it before, but I have to do it now. And so they came up with some of that sort of stuff as well, and the different groups that way. So, thank you.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing all that. I love that the kids feel a sense of ownership over it too, and it's not just, you know, the devices too, but it's all the software, how it's working, how it's talking to each other. So that's great. Thanks for sharing.
It's come up at other times. I didn't mention it in this. In the summer, we have a pretty robust program of students that come and work. But what we've been able to do this school year, unlike other school years, is actually match some students that had a regular study hall, or we figured out a way to do it within their lunch studies to actually give them some experience. They're in that lab helping repair some of this stuff. A student will come in and they see the first face they see is a student to help them swap out the device. And we don't wait around. If the student comes down, hey, I'm in the middle of trying to take a test, I have this problem, take this device, go finish your test. Come see us, end of school day, lunchtime tomorrow. In the meantime, we'll work on it and see what we can get going with this device. And if we can fix it, maybe we'll swap it back because you have some sort of personal affinity to that device. Sometimes we just say, keep that loaner, and that's now your regular device. And that's been another key feature of the support you've provided is we haven't, almost like sectioning, we haven't cut the numbers so tightly that we don't have the device count to do those types of things. And by not selling off the seniors stuff to them when they've left, that's given us a pool of devices to have for this quick loan turn, but it's also allowed us to then do experimentation with different groups of administrators or teachers or on testing days to just swap a device when a kid's having a problem.
And we've also been amazed that the kids have not damaged them the way we thought they would.
In other schools. Our break rate is lower than most other organizations.
My only question is related to Goal 5. So I know hackers now are getting very good and really targeting our students. They're the ones that are going to make the most money because their buying power will be much longer than somebody like me, right? And so I know we have SOPA, that's a law that says that we can't do business with companies that will guarantee that they won't sell our students information, right?
Right.
But I guess my question is related to, if I'm a teacher and I love this program and it's not necessarily SOPA compliant, are there ways that you prevent them from, or is that just an educational piece for teachers?
No, there's a lot to that, and just to wrap it up a little bit quick for you. Teachers and students are not administrators of their own machine. They cannot install software without a member of our team doing something.
Even web-based?
Web-based, they can get to certain things, but we also have filters on that. So if we know of a piece of software that our students shouldn't be getting at, or even a teacher shouldn't be getting at, we can place blocks in the filter system to say nobody from our environment is going to get to that. And then the idea of that they're not the administrator, they can't install software. So there's an element of that. It all comes through to us. Within the SOPA rules, there are some caveats. So if a piece of software is not designed for educational purposes, and technically right now Microsoft and Google are sort of playing some of that game with some of their product. Google doesn't have a leg to stand on when they say this is Google Enterprise for Education, blah, blah, blah software, right? But on the pieces like regular Gmail and docs and sheets, the core of the productivity suite, that's not marketed, that's not just an education software, that's a worldwide thing. But we have been in a situation not long ago where we had a piece of software requested, and blatantly in the materials, the privacy policy that particular vendor put out, it says, we share your information with marketers and advertisers, and we just basically said, no, we have to find an alternate solution. It may be a wonderful product, but it's not appropriate, and it may be completely appropriate in a college environment, and that's one of the lines we straddle pretty regularly. Well, this college uses it.
We're
not a college.
We're in that right now with a textbook for next year. We'll have one more round of textbooks, and with our Yoga 3, students are going to be able to be certified yoga instructors. Well, the textbook for that is not SOPA compliant, and it's all online. So we just started that process. So it starts first with me and the curriculum, and then it'll go to Ed's team, and they're going to investigate it and see how that's going to work and if that's going to be the right tool or not. And it does take a little longer, but we've made it a part of our curriculum review and a part of our adoption of software and course materials. So if you recall, half of our textbook adoptions last month were for software-based packaging, and so that is built into that as well. So everybody knows they can't just try something.
Yep, good.
Although they'll say, we saw this great thing, and it
Yeah,
does all
it's
these cool
great.
things.
It's
Like,
great.
yeah, nope.
Thank
But then
you.
when our tech coaches will try and figure out how to make it work, because usually Canvas will have something that'll do something similar, or there's a workaround in this company that does do it. And so we've usually been able to find a solution for a teacher.
Thank you. Other questions?
Only just gonna add that I really appreciate that you guys worked so well collaboratively together, and the times that we've met with the tech coaches and just the staff, the enthusiasm that they share for what they do and how helpful they want to be and supportive it's tremendous to see that level of engagement and along with our students as well. So, and really, yeah, I mean, I was there when we weren't one-to-one, and then we had to kind of flip a switch just like that, and just done really, really well. And just, I guess the only other thing I want to know is, as we're talking about the 5-year technology plan, appreciate outlining all the goals and stuff. If there's anything else beyond that you think that this board should know, or have some kind of sight for what should be coming down the road, kind of like, any other big pictures or needs that would help us to continue to be able to provide this to our community. I'd like to just kind of have a sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is that guiding document. So each year, as we're making recommendations for whether it's technology purchases or staffing needs or whatever, we're going to point to this as sort of that roadmap and hopefully align it with what's outlined there. And that's why I think it's important. The board did this 5 years ago, but we'd like to bring this back in 2 weeks and have you guys consider voting to approve it. That way, it does become a really important document that we can use moving forward. But I think also, to that point, Carrie, like if there are concepts that you're thinking about in your mind that relate to technology that aren't included in here at some level, that's feedback we would want to make sure we get.
Very collaborative process.
I just wanted to commend you on the plan. The way that you outlined it, the approach that you took, and maybe you've taken this approach in the past. I just love the user experience, insight, and I was one of the ones that was going down to the appendix to see what the data was that was being pulled from. But I just think it's so well organized and easy to follow. What did pique my interest was the global connections component, and this goes to Dr. Waterman's point. I'm really curious and hopeful that we kind of take a little bit of what we're seeing in the healthcare and other spaces where it's becoming more of a global conversation. Like when you think about telehealth, you're able to connect with physicians in the UK and, Sweden and different specialists kind of a thing, kind of a concept of how do we make this thing even better. So how do we do that with education, right? Creating these like global community rooms, if you will, where we're talking about global issues and maybe finding a way to solve it. Highlands does something similar to this, where they actually have created, identified a problem and had the students work with students across, the different communities globally and try to address it and find a solution. And just more of that kind of, and I know it's a little bit of curriculum integration, but how do we do that from a technology perspective, again, to kind of create that future state?
It's like taking the outside world and bringing it into the classroom. And
Yes.
There's a professional development component to that, which is cool. Yeah, it's a great idea.
And I'll take what might be considered the unusual perspective for the tech guy in the room. We start with what is the authentic and innovative learning experience, and we then look to the tech to support that. We figure out a way to harness the power of the technology to achieve those goals. So we open the doors to our faculty to build some of these relationships. And some of that is occurring naturally. They're teachers that of particular content areas will interconnect and they'll talk to one another at events, Canvas events or ISTE or some of those other kind of conferences, and they'll build some of those bridges. And then they'll figure out a way to share that with a couple of other partner teachers, and then they start thinking of the ways that can be embedded into the curriculum.
First.
Again, in a way that's authentic. We're not just plopping it on because we're not throwing a Zoom into the mix or a Google
Right,
Meet into the
right.
mix.
No, it has to
because
make
we
sense.
have it.
Right.
We actually, like to your point, we're going to have a conversation that is helpful to the content that we are studying. And so when you talk about I know other schools are doing things like clean water projects.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to talk to people in Flint. They're going to talk to people in third world countries that are dealing with or struggling with those concepts and looking for ways to make that real.
Yeah.
But it all comes back. It comes back to the curriculum of how that's going to be used.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Very much.
This will come back in 2 weeks.
All right, talk again in 2 weeks. Thank you. All right, that concludes our formal agenda, and I don't think we have any public participation. So, at this time, the board will move into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. 5 ALCS 120-2C1. The board will not be taking any action after closed session. Can we have a motion to move into closed session, please?
So moved.
Second?
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Beta Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon? Member Giannotti Fry?
Yes.
Member Strewing?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Gretsch?
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it tonight.
Good night.
Have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, you guys too.
Great.
Thank you.
Same.